The New Bedford Tyndall experiment inspired others to measure the flatness of water surfaces. Alexander Gleason, a civil engineer from Buffalo, New York, tested the flatness of the surface of Lake Erie. He published Is the Bible from Heaven 1890 and Is the Earth the Globe 1893. But not everyone who measured water's flatness got the same result. In 1896 Ulysses G. Morrow made such a test on the old Illinois drainage canal. He found the water surface concave upwards. Morrow considered this the most unmistakable evidence of the water's non-convexity. But he wasn't surprised, for he was already leaning to the view of Cyrus Reed Teed that the earth was hollow, and we lived on its inside surface, with the entire universe also inside. Morrow made similar sightings in 1896 from the shore of Lake Michigan at the World's Fairgrounds. 7 other sightings were made from Roby, Illinois in 1896, with similar results. These experiments of both flat and hollow Earth advocates were easily dismissed by critics as simply due to atmospheric refraction. Morrow sought the more convincing method for measuring water surfaces, one that would not use light. In 1897 he did the famous Naples experiment in Florida, measuring a nearly 4 miles water surface using a method that did not depend on light. He concluded that the Earth was concave, with a radius of a bit over 1,000 miles. During the last decades of the 19th century the flat earthers and hollow earthers paid close attention to each other's experiments, read their opponents' publications, and even corresponded, through the letters sections of their newsletters. The Earth was flat in Zion. In 1888 Scotsman John Alexander Dowie (1847–1907) brought these ideas to America, where he founded the Christian Catholic Church in Chicago. Dowie was a faith healer, and the journal Leaves of Healing was the official publication of the church. The church grew rapidly, and Dowie realized his dream of founding the Christian community in 1901. The Zion community located on the Lake Michigan shore, 40 miles north of Chicago. Alexander Dowie. Alexander Dowie, drawing by Champ. As the community grew and prospered, Dowie moved away from the simple life he had earlier advocated. He resided in a 25-room mansion, and designed for himself magnificent ecclesiastical robes, modeled after those worn by Aaron, the high priest, described in Leviticus. Community members thought he was putting on too much style, and his wife was criticized as too extravagant. In 1906, after suffering a stroke, Dowie was forced to resign his position. Dowie is rebuked. Wilbur Glenvoe Liver. Wilbur Glenvoe Liver (1870–1942) took over leadership of the church, which became the Christian Catholic Apostolic Church in Zion. Liver kept tight control on his 6,000 followers, which made up the community. The church schools taught the flat earth doctrine. His 100,000-watt radio station broadcast his diatribes against round earth astronomy, and the evils of evolution. In its early years, Zion was a one-religion community. The Scottish lace industry and a bakery were established. Zion brand Fig Bar cookies and White Dutch chocolates originated there. In the town of Zion a strict code of morality was imposed, by law, on all persons who set foot inside city limits. Irving Wallace, in his book The Square Pegs, tells of his childhood memories of Zion. There it was unlawful for women to wear short dresses, high heels, bathing suits or lipstick. Ham, bacon, oysters, liquor and tobacco were banned, as were drug stores, medical buildings and movie theaters. The 10 o'clock curfew was rigidly enforced. You could be arrested for whistling on Sunday. These laws were enforced by Liver's police force, called the Praetorian Guard, whose helmets carried the word Patience and whose sleeves bore images of ducks. Policemen wore Bibles and clubs on their belts. Irving Wallace interviewed Liver in 1932. Liver declared that the Bible was his entire scientific library. Astronomers were ignorant fools. The sun, he said, was only 3,000 miles away, and only 32 miles in diameter. When asked why he thought the sun so near the earth, he said, God made the sun to light the earth, and therefore must have placed it close to the task it was designed to do. What would you think of a man who built a house in Zion and put a lamp to light it in Kenosha, Wisconsin? The Zion communal industries were mostly ruined in the Depression. Rival churches made special efforts to send missionaries to Zion to break Woliver's religious monopoly. His political control of the town of Zion was finally broken as well. Woliver died in 1942, and Zion now has pork, lipstick, pharmacies and physicians, and you can safely whistle on Sunday. Woliver's Flat Earth Map. Modern Mechanics and Invention, October, 1931. The church's power declined in the 40s and 50s, partly due to financial scandals. But the church itself still exists, a pale shadow of its former glory. The white dove, symbol of patience. Seal of Zion. Zion today. I visited Zion in the summer of 1992. It's a small lake-shore community of middle-class homes and pleasant parks and beaches. One immediately recognizes the town's history and heritage in the street signs, for the north-south streets are named for people and places from the Bible: Gideon, Jethro, Galilee, Gilead, Gilboa, Gabriel, Ezra, Ezekiel, Enoch. When I was there, the police cars still carried the town seal, an emblem of the Zion Church. A lawsuit had been brought against the town because of this inappropriate use of a religious symbol. Several residents and church members I talked to were very indignant about this attempt to separate church and state. The original Zion Church, a wooden structure, burned in 1937, and has been replaced by a church with modern architectural design. Also gone is the Elijah Hospice, built in 1901. It was considered to be the largest wood-frame building in the world, with 350 rooms, dining rooms and parlors. It became the Zion Retirement Hotel and Nursing Home. Despite efforts to save it as a historical site, it was torn down in the late 1980s and replaced with a modern brick hospital. Zion now has over 100 churches of an astonishing variety, including many one-of-a-kind churches. There's even the nuclear power plant adjoining city limits. Shiloh House, a 25-room mansion built as the residence of John Alexander Dowie. The roof tiles have a zigzag pattern in yellow, green and brown, symbolizing the power of God. Photo by Donald Simonek. Shiloh House, the home of Alexander Dowie and later of Wilbur Woliver, still stands. It may be visited only on weekends, when the local historical society gives public tours. Flat Earth Society brochure. The Flat Earth in the late 20th century. Back in England, in 1956, Samuel Shenton, the sign painter and a Fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society and the Royal Geographic Society, revived the UZs, changing its name to the International Flat Earth Society. A brochure from the IFS forthrightly states its position. The International Flat Earth Society has been established to prove by sound reasoning and factual evidence that the present accepted theory that the Earth is a globe spinning on its axis every 24 hours and at the same time describing an orbit round the Sun at a speed of 66,000 m.p.h, is contrary to all experience and to sound common sense. In ancient times the ear was regarded as plain, and this is expressed in all literature up to a few hundred of years ago. The theory has fallen into disfavor, owing mainly to the dogmatism of modern science and popular education in schools, which leads to prejudice in favor of the globular theory from the start. It is always a pity to allow false theories to pass unchallenged, and it is hoped that the Flat Earth Society will do much to undo the harm that has been caused. Remember that the truth of the plane figure of the Earth can be shown by irrefutable evidence, and anyone who is interested in becoming a member is asked to contact the President or the organizing secretary. In future it is hoped to hold regular meetings of the Society. December 20, 1956. The Society received quite a bit of publicity when Shenton was shown photos of the round Earth taken from space. At first he wasn't impressed, saying it's easy to see how such a picture could fool the untrained eye. Indeed, A bug-eye wide-angle camera lens can produce a similar effect. Later, some reports said he admitted that the Flat Earth Society might have to reassess its position. But, after a brief period of uncertainty, he concluded that the space photos and the entire space program was faked by scientists desperately trying to save face by concealing the true nature of the shape of the Earth. Shenton died in March 1971. His wife helped choose a successor. The most enthusiastic potential leader within the organization seemed to be Charles K. Johnson of Lancaster, California. Samuel Shenton, illustrating Earth flatness. So Johnson became president of the Flat Earth Society in 1971 and inherited a large portion of Shenton's valuable library of books on flat Earth history. Johnson put out a newspaper called the International Flat Earth News. Its masthead declares its purpose: restoring the world to sanity. Charles Johnson. Johnson used biblical authority to assert that the Earth is a flat disk with the North Pole at the center and a wall of ice in the Antarctic regions, surrounding the whole perimeter of the Earth disk. In his universe, the Sun and Moon were about 32 miles in diameter and only 3,000 miles away. They, too, are flat disks. The stars are a mere 1,000 miles away. Where did Johnson get these figures? You won't find the calculations in his newspaper. They may have originated with Carpenter and Robotham in England, and are accepted without question as authoritative by flat earthers today. Rethinking their Eratosthenes. One can reconstruct the origin of these numbers by doing a little geometry, starting from a flat Earth hypothesis. Remember the experiment of Eratosthenes, who measured the angular elevation of the Sun at 2 latitudes in Egypt. He assumed that the Sun was effectively infinitely far away, or at least so far compared to the Earth's size that the actual distance didn't matter. Then he calculated the diameter of the Earth using a second assumption, that the Earth was spherical. But suppose you abandon their Eratosthenes two assumptions, and adopt instead the assumption that the Earth is flat. Then, triangulation from the same data gives the distance to the Sun, 3,000 miles. See how a simple change of assumptions can drastically alter the entire cosmos. However, the round Earth was more than an arbitrary assumption for Eratosthenes, for he and his contemporaries had other very good reasons for knowing the Earth was round. Textbooks sometimes mislead by suggesting that his experiment was designed to prove the Earth was a sphere. It was not. It was only intended to measure the size of the sphere. Distance of Sun from a flat Earth, using Eratosthenes method. Finally, the angular size of the Sun is 0.5 degrees. Using this fact with a distance to the Sun of 3,000 miles, gives the Sun's diameter, 32 miles. It therefore appears that the flat Earth's figures are based on Sun elevation data at just 2 particular latitudes, perhaps even their Eratosthenes values. I speculate the flat earthers may have picked these out of some book, and when the calculation was finished, they looked no further. For if they had done the calculation with a variety of latitudes, including large latitude differences, conflicting results would have been obtained. The Flat Earth by Donald E. Simonette. Early ideas about the shape of the Earth. Egyptian cosmogony. The ancients had many novel ideas about the shape of the Earth. The Babylonians thought the Earth was hollow, to provide space for their underworld. The Egyptians thought the Earth a square, with 4 corners with mountains at the edge supporting the vault of the sky. Aristotle argued for a spherical Earth. For these reasons, the gradual disappearance of ships over the horizon, the tops of the sails disappearing last, the shape of the curved shadow of the Earth on the Moon during eclipses, the variation of the Sun's elevation with latitude. This was the basis of Eratosthenes measurement. The variation of a star's elevation with latitude. The fact that one sees new stars as one moves north or south on the Earth's surface. Matter tends to form into drops or globs, and the Earth, in forming from chaotic matter, did the same. Proof by elephants. When one travels west from Greece, one finds elephants African. When one travels east one finds elephants Asian. Not realizing that these elephants are different kinds, he thought that one was traveling to the same lands by going in opposite directions. The last two obviously to us irrelevant, but the others represent valid arguments based on observations of nature. Flat Earth. George Gamow, Round Earth. George Gamow, the early Christian church accepted Aristotle's spherical earth. But a few malcontents within the church pointed out that the Bible speaks of the four corners of the earth. In the 5th century CE the monk Cosmas Indicopleustes, in his Christian topography, described the square earth with a heavenly vault, much like the Egyptian model. Tertullian also was a flat earther. Science writer Robert J. Scudwall gave me permission to quote the following paragraphs in which he summarizes the biblical evidence which flat earthers use to justify their position. He wrote this to a geocentrist fundamentalist who was arguing that the Bible supports a fixed, non-moving earth, with all the rest of the universe moving around us at about 1 revolution per day. Bob, of course, agreed that the Bible does support the view, but wonders why this particular fundamentalist did not also accept the idea that the earth is flat, since that has basis in the Bible also. The Bible is, from Genesis to Revelation, a flat earth book. While the Bible nowhere states categorically that the earth is flat, numerous Old Testament verses clearly show that the ancient Hebrews were flat earthers. This comes through more clearly in modern translations such as the New English Bible, but it's clear enough in the King James Version. The Genesis creation story says the earth is covered by a vault firmament and that the celestial bodies move inside the vault. See Genesis 1:6-8 and 1:17. Note that, even in KJV, while there are waters above the firmament, the celestial bodies are in it. This makes no sense unless one assumes that the earth is essentially flat. That the Hebrews considered the sun and moon to be small bodies near to the earth is clear from Joshua 10:12, which gives specific localities geographic in which they stood still. Isaiah 40:22 says that God sits throned on the vaulted roof of earth, whose inhabitants are like grasshoppers. In the book of Job, Eliphaz the Temanite says God walks to and fro on the vault of heaven. Job 20:14. The KJV translators copped out on the last two verses, but in both cases the implications are clear. That the earth was considered essentially flat is clear from Daniel, who said, "I saw a tree of great height at the center of the earth. The tree grew and became strong, reaching with its top to the sky and visible to the earth's farthest bounds." Daniel 4:10-11. Only on a flat earth could one see a tree reaching the sky dome from the earth's farthest bounds. The New Testament also implies a flat earth. For instance, Matthew 4:8 says that the devil took him Jesus to a very high mountain, and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their glory. From a sufficiently high mountain, one could see all of the kingdoms of the world but only if the earth were flat. The same applies to Revelation 1:7, which says that at the second coming, every eye shall see him. Finally, Revelation 7:1 refers to the four corners of the earth, and corners are not generally associated with spheres. Actually, if you want a good picture of the Hebrew conception of the earth, look in the Jewish Encyclopedia under Cosmography. You might also want to read the so-called Ethiopic Book of Enoch, written perhaps 150 BC. While not canonical, it's paraphrased or quoted a couple of times in the New Testament, so it was highly regarded in those days. Its flat earth implications are even stronger. The biblical cosmos model derives from Egyptian sources, which had a flat earth covered by a rounded sky vault supported at the four corners of the earth by high mountains. The waters above and the waters below in the book of Genesis refer to the Babylonian notion that the waters were divided, and some remained above the sky vault. The vault was like a leaky roof and some of that water falls down as rain. Astonishingly, some present-day biblical creationists now argue that this water above the sky was the source of the flood in the time of Noah. They realized that if the waters did cover the Earth to the highest mountain tops, there just isn't any source of that much water in the Earth or in the atmosphere. So it must have come from somewhere else, they argued, in their pathetic attempt to make creationism appear scientific. Eratosthenes measures the Earth. The round Earth. Eratosthenes c. 276 to 195 BCE was probably the first to accurately measure the size of the Earth. He knew that at summer solstice the sun was directly overhead in Syene, now Aswan, Egypt. On that day, vertical sticks or poles cast no shadows, and sunlight fills the bottom of wells. The town of Alexandria is directly north of Syene on the same meridian, and on that same day vertical poles do cast shadows, because the sun is then 7.2 degrees from the zenith. Eratosthenes assumed this to be due to the Earth's curvature. Knowing the distance between these cities to be 5,000 stadia from land surveys, he calculated the Earth's circumference to be 250,000 stadia. One stadium was 1/8 of a Roman mile, or 220 yards in modern measure. That's a circumference of a little over 24,662 miles, which is nearly the modern value of 24,900 miles. This value was considered too large by most of Eratosthenes' contemporaries, who preferred the smaller value worked out later by Poseidon 18,000 miles. The latter value was accepted by Ptolemy and Columbus, much later. Note that Eratosthenes made the assumption that the Sun was far enough away from the Earth that the incoming solar rays are parallel. Popular histories give the impression that Columbus had to contend with flat Earth believers to warn that he'd sail right off the edge of the Earth. It is even said that he set out to prove the Earth was round. That's myth. Geometry of Eratosthenes' measurement of the Earth. Most educated persons in Columbus' day accepted the round Earth. But there was difference of opinion about the Earth's size. Columbus made the mistake of relying on Ptolemy's value for the size of the Earth, which was much too small. Columbus therefore underestimated the length of the proposed voyage. He wanted to reach the Orient, but America got in the way. There were even some who accepted the round Earth, but misunderstood gravity. They thought that if you went too far you'd roll off. In fact, they had to postulate some sort of mountainous wall around the known world to keep the oceans from spilling off. The revival of flat Earth theories. Bob Shadwell, who researched the flat Earth idea to a greater extent than I have, tells me that the flat Earth idea was revived in the 18th century by the followers of the eccentric English sectarian and tailor, Lodowick Muggleton. I have been unable to independently confirm this. Origins of eccentric ideas are usually difficult to pin down. In any case, from the 18th century to the present day the flat Earth belief is bound up with religious fundamentalism. By 1800, Zetetic societies were flourishing in England. Zetetic means seeker or skeptic. The Flat Earthers took this name to symbolize their skepticism toward orthodox scientific views of the shape of the Earth. However, their skepticism was limited to science. Then, and now, the flat idea goes along with religious fundamentalism, and a literal interpretation of the Bible. I have yet to hear of a flat earther who is not also a biblical literalist. Samuel Burley Rowbottom 1816–1884, the 19th century religious fundamentalist, headed an Oganite colony, and promoted the flat earth philosophy. He's a shadowy figure for historians. He had a reputation of cynical dishonesty, and some think he didn't really believe what he promoted. He was an itinerant occurrer, and wrote under several pseudonyms: Tryon, S. Golden, Parallax, and Dr. Burley. His major work was Earth Not a Globe, written in 1849. Rowbottom concocted the fiendishly clever idea of light refraction in curved paths to save the hypothesis of the flat Earth, to account for what he called the optical illusions of sunrise and sunset. Rowbottom is the first flat earther to give the size of the Sun, 32 miles in diameter, the figure accepted by flat earthers today. However, he gave the distance to the Sun as 700 miles. a figure hard to reconcile with his value for its diameter. John Hampden (1819–1891) vigorously promoted the flat Earth idea in England. He founded the Truth Seekers Oracle and Scriptural Science Review in 1876. In 1870 Hampden made a bet with naturalist Alfred Wallace on the outcome of a test of the flatness of water in the Old Bedford Pine Vale. Both sides claimed the test confirmed their view, and flat earthers to this day assert that water surfaces have been proved to be flat. Hampden was known for his piety, and his abusive language. Feeling he had been wrong in the Bedford experiment, he buried Wallace in a blizzard of vitriolic pamphlets and letters to the editor. He even resorted to abusing by letter, as this letter to Mrs. Wallace shows. "Madam, if your infernal thief of a husband is brought home some day on a hurdle, with every bone in his head smashed to a pulp, you will know the reason. Do you tell him from me he is a lying infernal thief, and as sure as his name is Wallace he never dies in his bed. You must be a miserable wretch to be obliged to live with a convicted felon. Do not think or let him think I have done with him." John Hampden thought the sun only 600 miles away, and 32 miles in diameter. These numbers derived from Robotham, and added nothing new to flat Earth theory. After Robotham's death in 1884 his followers carried on the crusade. The Universal Zetetic Society UZES was founded in 1890, publishing a journal titled The Earth Not a Globe Review which had 1,000 subscribers. The UZES remained active well into the early 20th century, but slowly declined after World War I. Other flat earthers were active at this time. William Carpenter emigrated to Baltimore and wrote 100 Proofs that the Earth is not a globe in 1885. Lady Blount, wife of Sir Walter de Soderington Blount, promoted flat Earth ideas. She founded and edited the journal Earth from 1900 to 1904. Scotsman John Alexander Dowie (1847–1907) studied at Edinburgh University, then established a pastorate near Sydney, Australia, and included flat Earth dogma in his theology. A digression on measurements. In the last decades of the 19th century diverse models of the Earth and heavens were actively promoted. Isaac Newton Vail proposed an annular theory to account for the formation of the Earth and planets, but assumed a convex Earth. The Gilsian theory put the Earth and Sun in fixed positions, allowing the Earth to rotate. Taconic theory modeled the shape of the Earth as something like a cone, its base being the North Polar region, and its apex at the South Pole. There was even a small publication titled The Square World promoting an Earth shaped as an inverted soup bowl, the northern hemisphere being about as we know it, but with the southern hemisphere flaring out to a larger rim. It's a mystery why the author describes it as square, but it has something to do with the biblical reference to the four corners of the Earth.